Hello everyone, this is Mr. Dancer and his magic mask, the masked YouTuber who claims they like movies. Won't be wearing a mask today, gonna do a simpler video that's gonna be talking about Letterboxd lists that I really like. Alright, the first list we'll talk about is BJSYLVESTER's film canon. As you can see here, it's updated 20 days ago, and I feel like this list does get semi-frequently updated, which means that even if you've seen a lot of the films here, if you like the aesthetic of this list, it's still worth your time to follow and like. Because in the future, it might give you a movie you haven't considered watching yet. Created by Brandon Sylvester, it is his only list for now, but I really do like this list a lot. In fact, I even made a comment here 11 months ago going, yo, this list rules. I think I've seen a little less than 50%. Hope to change that soon. So unfortunately, I think my 11th month self probably overestimated my ability to watch movies. So I don't think I've seen that much more since then, which is quite disappointing. But my excuse is this list is kind of long. It's 327 films. It's not the easiest list to binge off. It still provides a very good sort of alternative film canon to some of the other outside, more accepted, mainstream sort of art house film canons out there. The list is set in chronological order. So as you can see here, we start with Lemire, Griffith, and then as I scroll down, we get more and more modern. And that's 327 films and more modern. Which means there's a very, very good representation of every single decade. Genre-wise, you can see already that there's different thrillers, there's different melodramas, there's westerns, and you'll find a lot of different types of genres you don't expect to find on a sort of film canon. So if you're a shorts fan, I'm going to quickly go over some shorts. I sort of ordered this list by shortest to longest. And right away, I think you can see there's famous like art house cult shorts, right? Like Islands of Fire. Then we have Past the Dew, the famous dancing short. Here's a Reassemblage. I also really like some of the documentary diversity on this list. We have Alone in the Wilderness, one of the more famous ones. And then right beside it, you see that there's a Nessilik Eskimo series by a director called Quentin Brown. So these are all part of it, which had a lot of acclaim, but I think a lot less people know about it. And that's kind of cool to see different types of popularities on the same list. Besides that, we also have a lot of sort of experimental diversity, experimental film diversity, right? So you have Tio Hernandez shorts. You also even have Weather Diary 1 by George Kuchar right here as we load it up. So if you take a look at this list and realize you haven't seen a lot of the films on this list and you feel a little overwhelmed because you think all the lists on this movie all the movies on this list are pretentious, you don't really need to think of it like that, actually. This is still a film canon of a list, and what I mean by that is that you'll find a lot of classic underrated directors on this list. So what I'm defining as a classic underrated director is basically the type of director that a lot of people name drop when they want to talk about the most underrated directors in our film sort of appreciation circle, right? So here's a good example. Hiroshi Shimuzu's 3 films are here, which is a very common Japanese 1930s Japanese director, and his name gets name dropped a lot when it comes to underrated movies. We also have we have a few of the 2 big Portuguese directors, right? Montero and Oliveira, so Hovering Over the Water here, Abraham's Valley here. So I would actually like to give a bit of a shout out to the international nature of this list, right? This list has, of course, Japanese cinema, European cinema, American cinema, but for me, I personally really like the fact that it has films like Sem Essa, very chaotic movie from Brazil, directed by Rogério Sancanzela. there's a lot of different Indian films on this list, and what I mean by that is that India is a relatively large place, so with many different regions, and each region has sort of its own film history, right? For example, this film is directed by Adoor Gopalakrishnan, who is considered the sort of film pioneer of the Malayalam region. If I take a look at lowest rating first, you can see there's actually a lot of genre sort of films. So Showgirls, Eat It Alive, The Wacky Life Force, and you can tell that there's actually a lot of comedies and some other thrillers and horrors that might not be considered the most high art, but they're definitely super, super fun. The next list we'll talk about is a way more popular list. It's called Women and Their Murderous Tendencies, and it's created by Clara. Clara is actually kind of a list maker, and they have like a lot of different lists about women and homosexuality. So this list really fits in with their sort of expertise, right? This list has about 3,082 views right now as I'm looking at it. And that is probably at least in the top 1% of likes on Letterboxd. I still want to talk about this list despite how popular it is, because I have also liked this list for a very, very, very long time. And I also think this list is particularly easy to binge through. So if you're looking for a list that you actually can feel like to complete, this is a great list to choose. One of the reasons for this is it's only 87 films long, which is not the longest, and you can definitely do this in about 3 months, even if you're taking your time. The other thing I like about this list that makes it easy to binge is that it's color-coded in color order. It's not the first list to do this, but I do remember this list being one of the early ones to. And since it's color-coded, though, it makes it kind of extra fun to try to complete, try to look through, and try to enjoy. So I have to be completely honest with you, but the reason why this list is so easy to binge for me is because it's an exploitative film. This title, Women and Their Murderous Tendencies, is not exactly trying to hide what this film list is about, right? It's actually a very spoiler kind of title. So, this whole list is kind of a gender exploitative and violence exploitative list at the same time. You're going to find a lot of very attractive women and a lot of sick kills, which for me is basically absolute perfection. These films are very clear cut in what type of experience you usually are going to get in. There are some differences. For example, Raw is more of a French sort of art house new wave sort of film compared to something like Jawbreaker, which is a 90s coming of age cult kind of movie. And then you have Final Girls, which is a today sort of lower budget Netflix film. So genre-wise, you'll realize a lot of them are more or less kind of in the same genre. A lot of horrors, a lot of thrillers. A lot of these movies will be darker, grimier, and, you know, a lot of these movies have very attractive women, and there are some type of murder going to happen somewhere. So currently, I have this list ordered by lowest average rating on Letterboxd first to the highest. And the reason why I wanted to do this is to quickly let you guys see some of the lowest rated movies on this list. If you immediately see some movies that you're like, holy crap, this film sucks, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. Or if you see some movies here that you immediately recognize as extremely sexist, again, very, very fair. This list will bound to have probably some films that are kind of quite sexist and also quite shit. I still highly recommend trying to binge through this list because some of the guilty pleasure potential on these films is very, very, very high. And I've always enjoyed developing different guilty pleasures because it sort of diversifies your favorite film canon in a way, right? On this list, my favorite sort of guilty pleasures is probably Tragedy Girls, which is a very fun sort of anti-spin-off on serial killers, where the victims end up becoming the killers themselves in a really fun, fucked up way. Of course, I can't forget about The Craft, which is a beautiful, beautiful for outcast social witch film. And perhaps my favorite guilty pleasure on this list is Necromantic 2, the sequel to Necromantic, a German film on necrophilia. And in Necromantic 2, the woman, yes, does fuck some corpses. So if you really hate necrophilia, then maybe this film is probably not for you. So the next list we'll talk about today is Drifting, Wandering, Roving Life, Roads, a list created by Lily Ho. Lily Ho's kind of has quite a bit of lists that I enjoy, and many of her lists focus on Chinese cinema. So that's kind of her expertise. You're going to actually see some probably more Chinese cinema in this list compared to some of the other road list movies out there. This list is, again, very easy to binge, 30 films long, and I also really think this list in particular really does embrace and embody this word drifting and wandering. It's a very, I guess to quote Wordsworth, this is a very I wandered lonely as a cloud sort of list. And I use the word road movie, but I don't think Lily would call this list particularly a road movie list. As we can see here, she writes drifting, wandering, roving life, a subject very recurrent in films by many directors such as Jim Jarmusch, David Lynch, Wim Wenders, Wong Kar-wai, Aki Kaurismäki, Tony Gottlieb, and Emir Kusturica, right? So her point here is that these types of films are more going to be about people who are a little more stateless or a little more lost rather than a actual type of road film. Still, I do think these type of movies share a lot of similarities to road films, and so the positive road films you'll still find in a lot of these movies. This film is a very good intro to some classic international cinema. You have one of the most famous Chinese films right here, In the Heat of the Sun. One of the most famous African films, sub-Saharan African films, Yilin. And then you have Taste of Cherry, one of the epitomes of Iranian cinema, La Libertad, the Argentinian film. So then you also have different types of very, very famous art house movies, such as Days of Being Wild by Wong Kar-wai and Blue Velvet by David Lynch. So for me, road lists are really fun because they're kind of filled with films where you get to see many different parts of the world that you don't normally get to see. Just because a film is set in America doesn't mean you've seen all of America. And a lot of times, road movies are the type of movies that will lend itself for you to, see other parts of that country on the movie screen. So this is why this list is particularly interesting to me. And these vagabond characters are great sort of carriers of these stories. So I highly recommend this list, and hopefully you will enjoy exploring it. So this is my awkward outro. Let me know what you guys think about these 3 lists.
if you have movies on them you like, if you have movies on them you hate. Also, if you have lists on Letterboxd you like, you can always send them my way. I'll check them out and see if I end up liking them and want to talk about them. You can also send me lists you create. I'm down to also take a look at that. If you like this video in particular, of course, subscribe, like, check out some of my other videos. It's a fun channel all around, and I would greatly appreciate it. That's all I have to say. So long, my friends.